Καλησπέρα σε όλους. Καλησπέρα σας. Καλησπέρα σε όλους. Τελειώσει, κυρία Καραμέλη. Καλησπέρα σε όλες και όλους. Σας καλωσορίζουμε στο 4ο Διεθνές Συνέδριο με θέμα Οικονομικό μοντέλο, Νόμισμα και Κληρονομικό Δίκαιο στην αρχαία Σπάρτη. Το Ινστιτούτου Σπάρτης, σε συνεργασία με το Τμήμα Νομικής και Ψηφιακής Κοινωνίας, Πανεπιστήμιο Sapienza της Ρώμης, τη Σχολή Επιστημών Ανθρώπινης Κίνησης και Ποιότητας Ζωής του Πανεπιστημίου Πελοποννήσου, το Τμήμα Ξένων Γλωσσών, Διερμηνίας και Μετάφρασης του Ιωνίου Πανεπιστημίου, το Τμήμα Διοίκησης Τουρισμού, Πανεπιστήμιο Δυτικής Αττικής, είναι στην ευχάριστη θέση να σας παρουσιάσει την Επιστημονική Επιτροπή και τους εισηγητές του Συνεδρίου. Οι ανακοινώσεις θα πραγματοποιηθούν στα ελληνικά και αγγλικά με ταυτόχρονη διερμηνία στις δύο γλώσσες από την ομάδα της κυρίας Βαλαντάση Μαρίας και απευθείας μετάδοση από την ιστοσελίδα του Ινστιτούτου. Χορηγός επικοινωνίας είναι η ΕΡΤ. Το συνέδριο διοργανώνεται υπό την αιγίδα και την ευγενική χορηγία του Υπουργείου Πολιτισμού, του Δήμου Σπάρτης και της Περιφέρειας Πελοποννήσου, φορείς τους οποίους ευχαριστούμε θερμά. Τιμόμενη πόλη με την ονομασία Σπάρτη για το 2024 θα είναι η Σπάρτη του Νιου Τζέρσεϊ και θα εκπροσωπηθεί στο συνέδριο από το Δημοτικό Σύμβουλο και πρώην Δήμαρχο κύριο Ντάνιελ Κιαριέλο. Ο κύριος Γιώργος Κωστάκος, εκτελεστικός διευθυντής στο Ίδρυμα για την Παγκόσμια Διακυβέρνηση και Αειφορία FOX και μέλος της Οργανωτικής Επιτροπής, θα παρουσιάσει την Επιστημονική Επιτροπή και τους εισηγητές του Συνεδρίου.
Ευχαριστώ, κύριε Αντωνίου. Ευχαριστούμε πολύ που ήρθατε. Η Επιστημονική Επιτροπή, λοιπόν, προεδρεύεται από τον κύριο Μιχάλη Σταθόπουλο, τον καθηγητή και πατριώτη μας, ακαδημαϊκό, ομότιμο καθηγητή της Νομικής Σχολής του Πανεπιστημίου Αθηνών. Επίσης, μέλη είναι ο καθηγητής Πολ Άντονι Κάρκλετς, A.G. Λεβέντης, ομότιμος καθηγητής του Ελληνικού Πολιτισμού στο Πανεπιστήμιο του Cambridge. Κάποιοι από τα μέλη αυτά θα είναι και ομιλητές και θα τους γνωρίσετε καλύτερα. Τον καθηγητή Άγγελο.
Business and Finance University of Athens. Professor Rita Sassou, Professor of Classic Archaeology from Ινστιτούτου Sapienza, University of Rome, and the Department of Classical Studies of Sapienza University as well. Teacher Paul Racher, Teacher of History, Professor Timothy Doran, Associate Professor in Cal State Los Angeles History Department in the University of Los Angeles, in the Department of History, and the Assistant Professor from Thessaloniki University. He teaches history of the financial institutions. We are really glad to be here today in the University of Peloponnese, and we deeply thank for the Mr. Kyprios for the hospitality. So, as for the speakers of the conference, there will be the professors of archaeology of Sparta, Professor of Ινστιτούτου Sapienza of Classic Archaeology, Dr. Christos Baloglou, PhD holder from the University of Frankfurt, Professor Yiannopoulos from the University of Hamburg, and from the University of Macedonia. Mrs. Despina Kucheri, writer, with special reference to the Spartan women, awarded by the Academy of Athens. Please, Mrs. Kanelopoulou, you may come here and take the floor and make your speech. Dear ladies and gentlemen, honorable guests, Mr. President of the organizing committee of our conference, Mr. Stathopoulos, honorable representatives of the institutional bodies, Mr. Deputy Regional Governor, Mr. Vratakos, dear friends, we welcome you all in our conference, and we deeply thank our guests and friends who came here in Sparta, and of course all of these that are together online with us in this modern hybrid conference, because without them we couldn't make this a great meeting and discussion on a topic that Sparta is internationally famous and respected for its economic model, its well-known currency, and it's unique for ancient Greek inheritance law. The Institute of Sparta is an urban non-profit company which functions since 2010, and it makes a great effort to contribute in the development of our homeland, serving the basis of the cultural tourism and the environmental actions which are deeply connected with the agricultural economy of Sparta and Laconia. This year's conference is the fourth international conference that we organize, and we hope to make better steps in the next few years. Of course, it's not the right time to talk about the actions of the Institute of Sparta, and after all, you can find them in the Institute site. Today is the right time to talk about Sparta, and even more talk about Sparta. People which loved it and devoted a great part of their scientific action and research to study on Sparta, do a research on Sparta for an area, a city which had been a leading power of its era. In all of the aggregate of Spartans contributed deeply in everything, and it is our topic for the conference of 2025, as well as the Spartan human, which was distinguished for its organizing and handling skills that we today will hear about how it gained. We are talking about Kiniska. Dear friends, Sparta is a great part not only for the local economy and development, but also for the regional and national as well. It is a national capital, and there are significant benefits, social or economical, for the new generations. This is what we want to achieve as the Spartans in order to make an effort and to change and to shape the actions in our historical region. We know that the institutional bodies, the Ministry of Culture, the region of Pελoponnnesus, the municipality of Sparta are working hard for this, and we should function as the way to be more useful. This is the first step that we want to achieve with our actions, and to have the right allies and who love Sparta. Recognition of this effort is can be seen from universities all around the globe. I really want to mention the cooperation between us and the University of Rome, of Sapienza, Rome, which was the organizing team of our conference on Sparta, to the named Historical Review of Sparta, and who co-organizing together with the University of Pheloponnese the summer school for Sparta. Together there with us, representing the chairs of those departments, who will salute you as well. Today we have a really distinguished guest, a representative of our sister Sparta from the University of New Jersey, the Sparta of New Jersey, Mr. Daniel Carello, with which we organize, we make great steps for the organization of the conference 2026. Let me thank the Ministry of Culture, the municipality of Sparta, and of course the Hellenic Broadcasting Corporation. We want to mention also our cooperation with the University of Peloponnese, especially with the School of Human Movement and Quality of Life Sciences of the University of Peloponnese, which co-organizes and co-coordinates many actions. Of course, the Department of Foreign Languages, Translation and Interpretation of Ionic University, which for the third year in a row provides us interpreting services with our distinguished students, and the Department of Tourist Management from the University of West Attica, which focuses on the cultural tourism. The colleagues of the Institute of Sparta functioned methodically and in a great way with a great results. I want to deeply thank you. Last but not least, we need to thank the local and regional media, which made a significant reference to our conference. Please, Professor Michalis Stathopoulos, you may take the floor to welcome you and salute you as well. Thank you very much. Dear Professor. Dear President of the Institute of Sparta, ladies and gentlemen, and a special welcome to the representative of our honored Sparta of New Jersey, who makes us an honor for participating here. I want to begin by congratulating the Institute of Sparta for everything, for all the actions the last few years, and for organizing today's conference with the topic focusing on ancient Sparta, which are based, either it has to do with inheritance law or economics. Let me, in this small talk, to mention Lycurgus legislation, which teaches us many lessons really important for today as well, that ancient Sparta has succeeded on them, and we do not have the same ability. As Plutarch has said, and Polybius as well, Polybius was one of the fans of Sparta, Platon as well. There were so many fans of Sparta, and they admired the Lycurgus legislation, and also in the modern era, Enlightenment, revolutions have been influenced by Sparta, and they didn't admire the military part of Sparta, but the state, the rules of state. Lycurgus has this principle: even there is only one power in one state. This is a great. This is really wrong. This is a great mistake. The state will. This state will be. This state will extinct. And there is. This state will make so many mistakes, and it will, in the end, extinct. The state needs many different powers, and Lycurgus rules are based on three main political powers, on three politic instruments. For example, Sparta had found democracy when Athens didn't have, but there was also the part of there was a part of a non-democratic of governing of the few, and there was also the instrument called Gerousia, which had oral senate, which was responsible to control the the main government, so as not to become tyrants. It had the right of the veto, we can say. It could make the Senate extinct and to make the it had such rights, and so you can see that the need of the many political instruments brought a balance in this situation. Moreover, regarding the Senate, with this well-known instrument that Plato admired, Plato said that well thinking and wise thinking was really important, because the members of the Senate were chosen by the wiser men and older men, and those men were quite a few. There was a collective character in this too. The members of the Senate were 8, and they had meetings. There were 28 persons, and all decisions were wisely made. Please think of today, and I want to discuss this in parallel with the modern era, with today's situations. We have a world where the Prime Minister is on the epicenter. And this is happening since 1926. In 1986, and the Prime Minister had fundamental rights, and he contributed in the decisions. In the 1986, you may remember the governor. Today, there's no opposition in the Prime Minister and the existing government, and what Plato and Senate called wisdom. This was a consequence of the discussion through the dialogue, the arguments that a collective instrument can make. I think that today, because we discuss everything in comparison with today's conditions, what we are now discussing is we're discussing on the basis, without dialogue, without arguments from both sides. We just call citizens not to think. We don't want wise citizens and thinking citizens, but we only, without having parties, conferences or committees, it is on the citizens' decision. Just say a yes or a no, and there's no discussion, no wisdom. But the Senate was really strong. Despite the other two political instruments, it had power, Senate had power, and it said that, and one day, Senate should be limited to And now the institution of Ephori was made and was created. I really want to mention something from Aristoteles. The many are less interesting from the one or the few, which means that we've always had collective instruments, and when the body of Ephori was created, and as someone has mentioned the word psilon, which means the obstacle to the few, for example, the Senate and the kings. So Ephori were able to control all citizens, all the appella or the kings and the Senate as well, and they were really powerful. And this was also to be tackled. And please pay attention to this. Someone should face them as well. And another body, another political body or political institution should be created in order to limit the previous one. And thus I conclude again to the wisdom of Lycurgus and for the theory of Lycurgus, because all these powerful people could be limited, because this new body had only to fulfill a mandate, and they had only 5 years to govern in one way. So this was the positive part. I should say something negative to Plutarchos. Admired the stability of the theory of Lycurgus. It is okay, it may seem positive, but it is a negative thing as well. And probably Sparta had paid for this, and when we have the same legislation for many years, we will get used to it, and we cannot adapt in the new conditions, in the development, and this of course affects progress. However, the lesson that we can keep for our today's country is that these two principles, these two great principles, to have during the in the government of these of a country, an opposition, an opposite side, and of course wisdom to be implemented. Nowadays, we are talking about revising to revise the constitution. So we should see, will all these legislators think about creating an opposite side as well? So I want to mention again opposition, the opposite side, and wisdom. I want to close my speech with these two principles, and I wish that this conference would be really beneficial for everyone. Thank you very much. We call Theodoros Veroutis to welcome you and salute you as well, the Deputy Regional Governor of Sparta. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome in Sparta our distinguished guests, the guests of our conference. I'm really surprised, and from the day, not only from today, but from the day that I learned about the conference, and from how many distinguished people are here today with us, and how this meeting is also made in a hybrid way, so as our co-citizens to be able to attend this conference remotely. I will keep in mind that what our compatriot has said, the opposite side and the wisdom, that were really important. And I want to wish to you the best conclusions from this conference, and something that was already said by the presidents of the conference, that through research and studying our unique city, to come to conclusions that can be used in the modern era. So I wish you luck. I wish luck to the conference and to its actions, and I wish to you all the best conclusions that you can make. We call Mr. Stefanos Vretakos, member of the board, president of the board of directors, to represent the municipality of Sparta. Good afternoon. Mr. Deputy Regional Governor, Mr. President of the Institute of Sparta, Mr. Stathopoulos. Representing the municipality of Sparta and the mayor himself, I have the honor and pleasure to be here today with you, and I welcome you in our city in the framework of this really interesting conference organized by the Institute of Sparta under the auspices of the municipality of Sparta and the Ministry of Culture. With organizations such this, with such topic, let alone with participators of that status, there's the ability to deeply study the fundamental capitals and theory of our history, and at the same time to many sectors of this science. Closing my short speech, I want to congratulate the Institute of Sparta and the organizing committee, and wish you all, I wish to all the guests a really prosperous conference, today's conference. We salute the beginning of the conference of Sparta, organized by the Institute of Sparta. Deep congratulations to Mrs. Kanalopoulou, and I'm really sad for not attending the conference because I had to attend the international a conference in Thessaloniki. So many speakers will try to communicate with us the results and the conclusions of this year's conference. I really want to highlight that the stigma of the Institute of Sparta is significant. It touches and it covers so many topics from the ancient or modern city as well, and the results are to enhance the image of Sparta and Laconia, and those actions are really viable and beneficial. And I want to salute the councilman of New Jersey. Message of Mr. Athanasios Davakis. Dear President, thank you very much for the honor of this invitation to participate in the 4th International Scientific Conference in Sparta, which has the topic Economic Model, Currency, Inheritance Law in Ancient Sparta. We can all see that from this title and the participators, this scientific meeting is really interesting, and I'm really sad for not managing to participate in this conference and be there with us. I want to congratulate you for this initiative and wish you the best luck. Message from Nagia Grigorakou. Dear Kanalopoulou, I was really glad to receive the invitation from the 4th International Scientific Conference in Sparta with this really interesting topic. I'm sure that those distinguished speakers will contribute in enhancing unknown aspects of our homeland. I really want to congratulate the Institute of Sparta for its role in showing the image of Sparta. I deeply congratulate you, and I'm really sorry for not being there. Mrs. Nag is MP of PASOK.
Και τώρα θα θέλαμε να δώσουμε το λόγο στον κύριο καθηγητά Μάριο Κάρτα, ο οποίος εκπροσωπεί...
Professor Carta.
Good evening. I'm extremely pleased to greet you all, both personally and on behalf of the Department of Law and Digital Society of Unitelma Sapienza University of Rome on this fourth international conference dedicated to Sparta, and this year specifically to economic model, currency, and inheritance law in ancient Sparta. The International Conference on Sparta has now become an annual meeting. I'm glad to meet once again in this occasion many of the friends and colleagues who participated last year in the third edition of the conference, which was held in Rome at the headquarters of Unitelma Sapienza and Sapienza University, and which was dedicated to the ancient religion of Sparta. The proceedings of the conference are currently under publication. The topics of this year's conference perfectly fit with the core objective of our department, which pursues an advancement of knowledge in the field of law, economics, digital tools, and cultural heritage. In fact, the conference, with its many distinguished speakers from Greece, Italy, and the United States of America, will deal with the economic model and the legal system of ancient Sparta by stressing its social implications and unveiling the importance of Lacedaemonian cultural heritage. The series of annual conference focus on Sparta is one of the many outcomes of the framework agreement that has been signed by the Department of Law and Digital Society, the University of the Peloponnese, and the Institute of Sparta. The agreement, signed in 2023, complements the one already signed with the Department of Classical Antiquities of Sapienza in 2020, and seeks to foster cooperation among the parties in the field of scientific research, didactic and educational programs, exchange of students and professors, and the final goal of promoting the knowledge of ancient Sparta, a city-state which distinguished itself from other Greek polis under many respects, for instance in moral, military, financial, legal, social, religious, educational, and sport life. With regard to the latter, I would like to point it out that during this day, another joint initiative of the Institute of Sparta, the University of Peloponnese, the Department of Law and Digital Society of Unitelma Sapienza, and the Department of Classics of Sapienza is going on, namely the summer school dedicated to sport and athletics in the ancient world and in Sparta. The educational program, which is an integral part of the master's degree in classical archaeology offered by our university, foresees a series of lessons dedicated to the history of Sparta, to the role and value of sport and athletics in ancient world, and specifically in Sparta, and to the digital technologies applied to the archaeological field. In fact, the digital field plays a key role in modern society, and that's why it has been selected as a main subject for the school and for our department as well, Beside the lessons, a series of visits to the main archaeological sites and museums of Sparta and the Peloponnese are taking place. So the summer school stands as a unique occasion for its participants to directly experience some of the most representative archaeological sites, monuments, and architecture of ancient Sparta. The summer school is also an opportunity, particularly timely into the working context, for future archaeologists to develop cross-sectoral competencies in different yet complementary sectors such as cultural heritage, law, digital, and communication technology. Finally, I would like to express my sincerest thanks to Mrs. Anastasia Canellopoulou, President of the Institute of Sparta, for the great energies and enthusiasm that she has put in the project preparation and its concrete implementation. And many thanks to Professor Athanasios Katsis, Rector of the University of Peloponnese, for the hospitality in this wonderful location. And to Professor Georg Kyprais, Dean of the School of Human Movement and Quality of Life Science and Director of the Sport Organization and Administration Department of the University of Peloponnese, for the fruitful collaboration. I would like also to give a special thanks to Professor Sassou for her tireless work and effective coordination of the many important scientific and research activities in which the department I had is involved, such as those in Sparta these days. Welcome to all of you. I wish you a productive time ahead. Enjoy your stay in Sparta.
Our next speaker is Professor Giorgio Piras, who is the president of the Classical Archaeology Department of Sapienza University of Rome. Thank you.
I'm very glad to welcome you, all of you, to the fourth International Conference about Sparta, organized by the Institute of Sparta in collaboration with our Department of Classical Archaeology, or better, Classical Antiquity of Sapienza, University of Rome, the Department of Law and Digital Society of Unitelma Sapienza University, the University of Peloponnese, which is hosting us in this distinguished headquarters, the Ionian University, and the University of West Attica. Particularly, I would like to express my sincerest thanks to Mrs. Anastasia Canellopoulou, President of the Institute of Sparta, for her continuous zeal in promoting the study, the research, and the valorization of the city of Sparta, and the cooperation with our university and scholars. Together with the above-mentioned institutions, 3 international conferences have been already organized with a view of fostering a deeper knowledge of history and culture of the ancient Lacedaemonian polis, whose heritage still stands as a model for today's societies under many respects. The first conference, held in 2021, was dedicated to international relations in antiquity. The second one, held in 2022, to Hellenistic Sparta and the Battle of Sellasia. The last one, held in 2023, to Spartan religion. I believe it's a great achievement that we succeeded to reach with the current conference, the 4th edition of this important initiative, which has now turned into an annual awaited appointment. As occurred in the previous years, the conference is a great occasion to gather together various experts, specialists, and authors with different backgrounds, who can here share the outputs of their research, their visions and interpretation of Sparta within an international environment and a strongly intersectorial approach. Moreover, the proceedings of the conference, as occurred for the previous ones, are going to be published in the Historical Review of Sparta, a scientific journal edited by Sapienza Publishing House, meant to be an interdisciplinary space were to reflect on the historical, political, ideological, cultural, and military role played by Sparta in the pre-classical, classical, and post-classical era. Also in this case, the academic journal is the result of a joint initiative of Sapienza at the University of Rome, Department of Classical Antiquities, and the Institute of Sparta. In order to reach a wide audience, the journal is published both in printed version and in electronic one in open access, freely downloadable form. This year, the conference is going to deal with the economic models, currency, and inheritance law in ancient Sparta, and it is articulated into three main sections. In the first one, the topic of the economic model of ancient Sparta will be addressed by three speeches about the reason why we should care today about ancient Sparta and Spartans, the reconstruction of financial system of the polis, and a reflection about the so-called Spartan mirage. Tomorrow's section will be dedicated respectively to the role of currency and inheritance law. We will have the chance to listen to a variety of speeches illustrating and debating of relevant topics such as Spartan eugenetics, the overall economic organization of ancient Sparta, and the League of Lacedaemonians, the system of exchanges in a pre-monetary system, and the subsequent development of monetization, the legal framework of ancient Sparta, with a specific focus on inheritance law, and particularly the position of women. In many cases, the debate on the past will turn into an occasion to reflect on the present, on today. I'm confident that the 2 days will bring out new ideas and fresh insights in the modern reconstruction of ancient Sparta and will result in novel perspectives on Lacedaemonian history. Finally, I would like to express my gratitude to all the institutions, professors, research experts, and collaborators involved in the preparation and implementation of this event, and I wish you a fruitful, pleasant, and successful continuation. Welcome to all of you.
Παρακαλούμε τον κύριο Γιώργο Κυπραίο, καθηγητή, κοσμήτωρα της Σχολής Επιστημών, Ανθρώπινης Κίνησης και Ποιότητας Ζωής του Πανεπιστημίου Πελοποννήσου για ένα χαιρετισμό.
Αξιότιμε Πρόεδρε, Law of a Digital Society, Πανεπιστημίου Umitelma Sapienza, κύριε Μάριο Κάρτα, αξιότιμε Πρόεδρε της Κλασικής Αρχαιολογίας του Πανεπιστημίου Sapienza, κύριε Τζόρτζιο Πύρας,
Honorable President of the Department of Classical Archaeological of Sapienza University, Mr. Giorgio Piras, benvenuto a Sparta. Honorable President of the Scientific Committee of the Conference, Mr. Stathopoulos, Honorable President of the Institute of Sparta, Ms. Kanelopoulou, Honorable former Mayor of Sparta, New Jersey, Mr. Daniel Chiarello, Honorable Vice Mayor, Mr. Veroutis, Honorable Minister, Mr. Arachovitis, Honorable Rector, Mr. Kotios, that you are saluting us, not live, and I will say something if you let me. For 2 years, we use the services. For 2 years, Elke has been cutting our budget. We are going to pay this because if it's not going that way, honorable members of the Institute of Sparta, honorable gentlemen, honorable ladies, distinguished guests, on behalf of the School of Human Movement and Quality of Life of the Department of Sports, Organization and Management of the University of the Peloponnese, I welcome the opening ceremony of the conference. It is with great interest and great pleasure that we welcome today at the University of Peloponnese the 4th International Scientific Conference of Sparta, Economic Model, Currency and Inheritance Law. The University of Peloponnese honors the multifaceted work of the Institute, aiming to contribute to science, culture, and society. The presence of distinguished scientists and intellectuals from university institutions of Greece and abroad as well testifies the magnitude of your vision to support the city of Sparta in creating international, and is an honor for its citizens. At this point, I in turn applaud the approach of Ms. Kanilopoulou, President of the Institute of Sparta, and this is a success of Sparta in general. The city that is the first of the two greatest brands of the ancient Greek world. By studying its glorious history, one continues to inspire and teach values that are still and today a demand. As Mr. Stathopoulos said, Lycurgian legislation, agogy, the pursuit of self-sufficiency, the equality, the emancipation of the Spartan woman, and her strong social position are unsurpassed imprints of this glorious city worldwidely. We ought not to ignore, but to appreciate the work of our ancestors. So with full respect for the past and with a history to guide us in the future, we are planning it in a different way, in a different world. And with these few thoughts, I would like to warmly congratulate the organizers and those who contributed to the realization of the 4th International Scientific Conference, and I wish you good luck in your work. Thank you very much. Please, Professor Kostas Marinakos, to salute. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the President of the Department of Tourism Management of the University of Western Attica that I represent today, we would like to thank President and the members of the Institute of Sparta, the organizing committee, that they are inviting us today, and to cooperate with them in the implementation of this distinguished conference. And we're going to talk about the economic model, currency, and inheritance law in ancient Sparta, and we aim to actually take advantage of our cultural heritage in general. Sparta was one of the most important city-states, and with such an economic model, that theoretically at least, they would Sparta was really austere, and the norms of it as well, economically, financially, and socially. I think that through these works on this conference, we will highlight economic, social, and many other aspects of ancient Sparta, and they will let us discover the way that Spartans lived. And of course, their everyday life, in a way, maybe that they haven't become we actually promise to work with you. I wish good luck to this conference. Mr. Pro.
Dear guests, it is my great pleasure and really happy to welcome you in the 4th International Scientific Conference in Sparta, which is hosted in this historical city, an area which has deeply influenced the humanities history. Sparta, with its unique economical and social model, has been a topic of research and analysis for many centuries. Today we are here even remotely in order to deeply search the three aspects of ancient Sparta, its economic model, currency, and inheritance law. The topic of the conference is not only topical but also really important because it gives us the ability to understand that how the institutions and the financial structures of ancient Sparta had contributed in the power and the influence of the well-known Greek polis or cities. Sparta is really known for its simple lifestyle, military virtues, and discipline, and it has provided us many valuable lessons regarding the economy and the law, topics that are in the epicenter of the social organization in the modern era. Even though sometimes Sparta is covered from its intense military and political fame, they played a crucial role, those sectors play a crucial role in the shape of its identity and influence in the ancient world. First and foremost, the economic model of the Sparta differs from the other Greek cities because of the emphasis, because it emphasizes on the self-efficiency and simplicity. Spartans applied a system that limited the economical inequality and highlighted the collective responsibility and the common good. This system seems weird in comparison with other modern economic models, but the moral basis and the strategic simplicity are completely influenced until today many other economical systems. The fact that Sparta chose not to use variable metals such as gold or silver for its currency shows its difference with the way it functions and not focusing on luxury. The inheritance law of Sparta is the third really crucial topic of our conference. Sparta had a really important highlights the important role of women in its society because Spartan women inherited significant parts of the heritage and they had a significant economical and political role in the society. This unique structure highlights the importance of family and family relations and relations of power in Sparta. I need to congratulate the Institute of Sparta and the cooperating bodies and the whole of all the scientists and researchers that have participated in today's work. Sparta, as this year's conference highlights, is still a source of influence and lessons for all of us. I hope that the works of this conference will give us really valuable conclusions. I wish luck to all the speeches and to the conference in its whole. With great respect, Dimitris Ptochos, Regional Governor. Thank you very much.
I'm old, I need these. Right, as we said, my name is Dan Chiarello, but I really like when you say it, Mr. Chiariello, because that's the way it should be pronounced. My father got it all wrong when he came here, so thank you for that. Again, thank you so much for welcoming me to your beautiful and historic city. It is an honor for me to be here with you, to have this opportunity to speak with you. Everybody here that I've met is so warm and welcoming, and I really hope that I can return that favor with my gratitude and my that reflects back on you. My journey here started in 2018. I figured you might want to know why I'm here. The journey started in 2018 when I decided to run for our election to our city council. I had never done anything like that before, and I believed I would just enjoy the experience of having run. And to my surprise, the election really surprised me, and I think it surprised the other 4 people of the council as well. But really none more than myself. So it's been an honor to serve my town, and it's wonderful to have my town share this culture with you. It's really very moving for me. Sparta in New Jersey, in the United States, has about 20,000 people, so it's about the size of this town here. Our governing body consists of 5 members who serve a 4-year term. Each year we select from among ourselves, every year we select a mayor and deputy mayor from amongst the 5 of us. And I was honored to be in that role last year. So one day as mayor, I was waiting in the township clerk's office, and I noticed a plaque on the wall that declared in 1969 that Sparta, New Jersey, USA, and Sparta, Greece were sister cities. And I actually have a copy of that plaque that sort of led me here. This was in a frame, and it couldn't fit in my suitcase. So here's what I saw that started this, and I'd like to present this to the. So I see this on the wall, and it says that we're sister cities, but as far as anyone knew, we did not do anything with that relationship. So I set out to find someone in Sparta, Greece, to make a connection, and it took me many months to finally find Anastasia Kanalopoulou. So thank you for guiding me, and I'm grateful for her guidance and support, and I look forward to strengthening our bond in the years ahead. My town in New Jersey is very proud of its relationship to this beautiful place that I find myself here today. However, I feel that in New Jersey we don't have a deep understanding and appreciation of the cultural legacy that is forged by our role models in Greece. This is the foundation that I want to strengthen together with the Sparta Institute. And you have to, I'm from New Jersey, so I speak fast by nature, and my wife is here to make sure I slow down, so I'm gonna slow down, make sure the translators are okay. So if I just give me the signal or something. So how did our town get its name? And very briefly, the family of Judge Robert Ogden II was a prominent figure in early New Jersey government and was a member of the First Continental Congress of the United States. And the Ogden family settled in Sparta in 1977. And from that, I'll pick up a book from my friend Gwen Donovan, who wrote about the history of our town. And Gwen Donovan writes, Robert Ogden's wife, Phoebe Hatfield Ogden, gave the name Sparta to her family's farm. She was said to have been inspired by her 3 sons and other men in the neighborhood who were fighting in the war for a just cause. Again, this was the time of the American Revolutionary War. Drawing a parallel to the way that the Spartans of ancient Greece fought. When the first post office was established in about 1987, Sparta was adopted as the town's name. And with more on the history, this is another prop. Okay, that's my last prop. Okay, so one thing I wanted to share as we teach and learn and preserve and celebrate the history of this wonderful place, I want to tell everyone here, presenters and guests, how important and fortunate you are to be here. You are tasked with the curation and the preservation of the cultural heritage of this great city. And that's a very important task, and I envy you. And I think back in the United States that so much of the history that we learn in the United States is learned in abstract. The buildings and the artifacts that define the culture of the peoples of the nation where we are 200 or 300 years old, maybe a little bit more. But beyond that time, much of the history of the peoples of our continent can only be learned in stories, in illustrations, in talks like this, and in one's imagination. That's because the peoples that lived in the Americas before European settlement, for the most part, did not build stone structures, nor did they have a written language that would survive to the present day. And the same is true for the students in America that are learning world history. You know, it's taught in a book or in a lecture, a photograph or a video. It's largely abstract. But here in Europe, the students here and yourselves can touch things and be in places. A few days ago, my wife and I stood on the steps. Well, we didn't stand on the steps because that's not allowed. But we stood near the steps of the temple of Apollo Epicurus at Basai, and I'm probably saying that wrong. Temple of Apollo. And my wife and I experienced that awe and the marvel of history spanning millennia. And for an American student, that tactile feeling of wonder and appreciation is very rare. But here in Sparta, you get to experience that every day, and you are fortunate, and I am jealous. So lastly, I want to thank the organizing team and the speakers that we will hear tonight who have put so much work and effort into making this conference a success. I thank the Institute and the municipality of Sparta for your gracious hospitality. And now I will join my wife, Lisa, and we will enjoy the company of everyone here as we discuss and learn and celebrate together. Thank you.
Είναι και η Σπάρτη αυτή που έχει να δώσει στον κύριο Κιαρέλο ένα δώρο, το οποίο είναι λίγο συμβολικό.
Which is somehow symbolic and has to do with the meaning of peace that we always send from here. It has to do with the sisterhood and the love. It has to do also with the tree of olive oils. Και αυτό είναι το για την αγάπη. Ευχαριστώ πολύ. We're now going to have the first session, which is the only one that we're going to have today, and I would like to invite Professor Mr. Stathopoulos to come to the scene because he's going to be the chair for the discussion for the economic model of Sparta. Also, I would also like to invite the Professor Paul Reich so as he to come to speak for the antiquity and the Spartan reflection. And Paul Reich, μπορείτε να...
Ομιλητές, φυσική παρουσία και θα έχουμε online τους υπόλοιπους δύο ομιλητές, τον καθηγητή Κάρτλετς και τον καθηγητή Άγγελο Σκότιος. Ελπίζω να μπορούμε να συνδεθούμε μαζί τους. Καλησπέρα. The first session of our conference has speakers. The first speaker is the famous professor of Cambridge University, Paul Cartledge, who will be connected online with a very interesting subject. Γιατί να νοιάζομαστε για τις αρχαίους πατιάτες και την Σπάρτη. It is an essence of the whole subject. Professor Cartledge, why we should care about ancient Sparta. I tried to my very brief address the value that even today we need to honor, but unfortunately we don't. The specialist is Mr. Cartledge, who, as we heard, speaks very well Greek. Mr. Professor, I cannot see him. Good afternoon, Mr. Professor. I'm really glad to see you. I don't know if you will speak English or Greek. He's very fluent. In English. You may have the chair. Either in English or Greek.
Ναι, ακούμε. Μόνο εγώ δεν σας βλέπω βέβαια, αλλά θα μπορώ να στρίψω για να σας βλέπω.
Can you all hear me? Paul Ray, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. President Kanalopoulou, Mayor Vakalopoulos, Professor Stathopoulos, Professor Ray, colleagues, friends, Axiotimi Kyries και Kyrie. I should like to begin by thanking and congratulating the organizing committee and especially its president, Mrs. Anastasia Kanalopoulou, for making this splendid international conference happen in the first place and for inviting me to take part. I am only sorry that I am unable to be with you in person in the city where since 1970 I have spent some of the happiest days of my life. It is a special honor and privilege for me to be joining such a distinguished cast of speakers, and I know that I speak for us all when I begin by thanking for their support the Hellenic Ministry of Culture and its cooperating institutions in both Greece and Italy, and the other members of the conference's scientific committee. I should also like to dedicate this suitably laconic talk of mine today to the memory of two fellow Spartologues, Nikos Birgalis and Jean Ducat. My title may perhaps have caused some surprise, even alarm among you, for which I apologize. Isn't it absolutely obvious, you will be saying, that we should, and we do, care and care very much about ancient Sparta and the ancient Spartans? So what is it exactly that I am getting at? In one word, reception. Though that one word is deceptive, because the issues it involves are many and complex. Let me start by taking us back to 20 years ago, when I was awarded the honorary citizenship of the Dήμος of Σπάρτη. This is an honor for which I am eternally grateful. I began my acceptance speech, a little controversially perhaps, by saying that despite all the many glories of ancient Sparta and the Spartans, there was also a darker side to those glories. And by that I was referring, of course, to the Helots. There was nothing unique or even special about the fact that the ancient Spartans held people in slavery. That was a universal fact of ancient Hellenic life. And it's possible to argue, as I have myself argued, that the Helots were the very basis, especially the economic basis, of ancient Sparta's many great achievements and glories. So we owe the Helots. But the fact remains that today, at least in most of the Western world, which culturally speaking is derived ultimately from the ancient Greeks, today enslavement is considered a wholly negative thing. So it is not a badge of honor for Sparta that the word helot has entered the English language. That English usage is, of course, just one dimension of the reception of Sparta today. The other two words that we Anglophones have borrowed from ancient Sparta are rather different, far more positive, though they are also capable of being interpreted in more than one way. Those two are Spartan, of course, and laconic, which I've already used. Spartan, the adjective, is mostly used to mean austere, spare, sparse, self-denying, self-reliant, in a word, tough. Entirely suitable, therefore, if one were to be thinking, as I think many people do today, of the ancient Spartans primarily in terms of their military capacity. And that's also the thought that lies ultimately behind the adoption of our word laconic. The ancient Greek word lakonikos meant simply Spartan in an ethnic sense. The modern English word refers specifically to language, utterance, to speech that is terse, clipped, minimalist, military speak. But here we move from description to evaluation, from antiquity to modernity, in a rather less comfortable way. An ancient Spartan laconic utterance that has been received, appropriated, in what I consider at best questionable terms, is molon labe. Those two words require at least 4 in English translation. Something like, come and get them, referring to weapons. You won't need me to remind you of the original context, the Battle of Thermopylae, fought in northern Greece about this time of the year, extremely hot, in 480 BC or BCE. Those two words are attributed, they're credited to King Leonidas I, and they are his proudly contemptuous response to invading Persian Emperor Xerxes' demand that he and his Hellenic resistance force should surrender their arms. The pride and contempt of the response are twofold. First, Greeks, Hellenes, and above all Spartans must never surrender, and especially not to non-Greeks. Second, the use of the second person singular, lave, not lavete. So far from kowtowing to a foreign imperial potentate, doing the obeisance that the great king of Persia expected from all his subjects, whether actual or prospective, the Spartan king here was giving an order in the familiar second person singular to the great king. The world turned upside down. The ensuing Battle of Thermopylae was, alas, in a way, a defeat, a major defeat in immediate practical terms. But in symbolic, moral, and above all morale terms, it was a heroic victory. It paved the way for the victories of Salamis, Mycale, and Plataea, and thus for the consequent legacy created by the flowering of Hellenic civilization that ensued. But what of the reception of that Thermopylae episode? Has it too always been uniformly glorious? I don't think so. To compare small with great, within the United Kingdom Parliament, following our, if I may say so, very unwise decision to leave the EU, there was a small faction within the ruling Conservative Party, a die-hard faction, that called itself the Spartans. Why? Because they saw themselves as defending, to the death, the Brexit decision, as if they were the Spartans defending the pass of Thermopylae against a horde of foreigners. This appropriation, this reception, was at best ethnocentric and nativist. It was possibly even borderline racist. But what then of the Golden Dawn, the Crécy Avrier, the ultra-nationalist, neo-fascist organization, which used to hold its Nuremberg-style rallies at Thermopylae? Or what of the self-styled Spartans led by Mr. Ilias Kasidaris within the present Greek parliament? Now, of course, such far-right appropriations, or rather misappropriations, are by no means confined within Europe to the UK and to Greece. In January only this year, a lengthy and chilling expose was published online which detailed far-right appeals to ancient Sparta in France. There are, I believe, receptions, misappropriations, and appropriations. Not all appropriations are equally poor. We should all, though, care, I think, when they are not good. In my opinion, all the European ones were overshadowed by what happened on January the 6th, 2021, in Washington, D.C. President then Trump, refusing to accept that he had lost the 2020 US presidential election, whipped up his supporters in a fashion horribly reminiscent of rabble-rousing speeches made in Italy and Germany in the 1920s and 1930s. And the result was an insurgency, an invasion of the Capitol, which involved not only damage to physical property at the heart of the United States democratic state, not only intimidation of state officials, but actual murders of them. Deeply shocking. And among the insurgents, the invaders, were Spartans. I don't mean actual people from today's Sparta, but people identifying their actions with what they took to be those of the ancient Spartans. These were people who embraced the slogan molon labe in the form of resistance to what they considered the deep state that allegedly wished to control, in particular, their gun use. So these were people dressed in pseudo-Spartan military gear, a truly shocking sight, and one that did the name of Sparta no good whatsoever. What's to be done then? No one has done more within the Anglophone scholarly community to expose and combat such appropriations than my dear friend and colleague and fellow honorary Spartan citizen, Professor Stephen Hodkinson of Nottingham University. And I give you just one illustration. Last February, he gave a typically brilliant talk entitled Recent Far-Right Appropriations of Sparta in Europe and the United States of America and their historical roots. That was within the context of a scholarly lecture series which has been run for many years now by the Centre for Spartan and Peloponnesian Studies, also of Nottingham University, and a thoroughly good example of the Spartan legacy and reception today. It is pioneered and it is led by the wonderful Dr. Chrysanthi Ralu. Besides exposing far-right misappropriations of ancient Sparta, Professor Hodgkinson campaigns also to correct what he considers to be another misunderstanding, though it's a less politically damaging one. And this is the general view held by scholars as well as members of the general public, I dare say even by Paul Ray, that ancient Sparta was a very military-minded kind of society and state. Now, this is part of Hodgkinson's general campaign to revise a widespread view, ancient as well as modern, that Sparta was different, if not unique, among the many hundreds of ancient Greek cities. Now, I can see why he should be keen to revise and play down Sparta's military image, because if ancient Sparta wasn't really especially military, then there's less reason today for would-be militarists, and that includes heads of government, not just ordinary politicians, to appeal to Sparta to justify their own militarism. Here I have, as a scholar, to beg to differ, and I part company with him. I think he plays down the military dimension too much. It's not the place, though, for me to spell out all my reasons for that. Instead, I'm going to end by accentuating the positive. What is it today that we can all look back to the ancient Spartans as exemplars and models to be followed? In one word, women. Half the human race, half the citizen body of ancient Sparta. It really was the case, and I tried to show this in an article on Spartan wives that I published over 40 years ago, that adult free women and wives in Sparta occupied a higher status than that of any other comparable females in all the ancient Hellenic world, in terms of their education, upbringing, and diet, in terms of their status and role in marriage, in terms of their public profile. And probably no ancient Spartan woman was of a higher status or had a higher profile than Kiniska. Now, admittedly, Kiniska was no ordinary Spartan woman. She wasn't the Spartan girl next door. She was a princess, or, as she put it herself, in an inscription carved into a statue base from Olympia. She was the daughter and sister of kings. Her father was King Archidamus II, her half-brother Agis II, and her full brother was Agesilaus II. Now, what on earth was a woman doing, talking about herself on a monument at Olympia, where notoriously all women, with just one exception, were barred from entering the sacred space, the altis, of Olympic men-only competition? Well, she gives the answer herself in ringing tones. I say that I am the only woman in all Hellas to have won this crown. This crown was an olive wreath, the victor's olive wreath. And yes, it was won at an Olympiad, that of 396 BCE. Because though women couldn't compete in person, they could compete by proxy in the equestrian events as owners of the horses and chariot teams that they entered. And in the case of Kiniska, these were horses that she not only owned, but also bred and trained as well. What's more, Kiniska won again at the following Olympiad in 392, a quite remarkable feat, one well worth making a song and dance about. And yet, what did her brother, Agesilaus II, make of it? Was he pleased and proud of what his sister had achieved, or was he disconcerted and rattled? Well, there's a passage in a work of the contemporary Athenian writer, Xenophon, which strongly suggests that his reaction was the latter, the negative reaction. Xenophon was himself very pro-Spartan. He was a friend and client of Agesilaus, in whose honor he composed a posthumous encomium. And it's in this work that he says it wasn't Kyniska's idea to go in for horse breeding and chariot racing, but his hero Agesilaus' idea. How come? Well, this is Agesilaus. To win a horse or chariot race wasn't a sign of manly virtue. It was a sign only of material wealth. So it's an essential part of Spartan economy, but not part of Spartan moral economy. Far more valuable, Agesilaus said, were war horses, which were, of course, ridden by men in war. Strange that he should say that, because we historians know how poor, how undervalued the cavalry of Sparta actually was. Agesilaus, in other words, was guilty of good, or rather bad, old-fashioned sexism, which conversely is why today's feminists have seized on Kyniska as a feminist icon, sometimes in the unlikeliest of places. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I draw to your attention Kyniska Advocacy Cycling, a campaign group dedicated to the equality of women in sport. Very appropriate for the context in which this wonderful conference is taking place. I quote from their publicity: "We women are tired of men's standards being the normal. We're bored of policies made with only men in mind. We're exhausted of being sexualized, sick of being paid less, worn out, fearing for our lives, done with being disrespected, finished with being the nice to have," and so on. They conclude, "We are women in sport, for women in sport. We are Kyniska." So, if you need a reason to care about ancient Sparta, that one alone should be sufficient, at any rate, to start with. If you have been, thank you for listening.
We thank you, Professor Katlis. After your brilliant speech, I think that we modern Spartans, we love our ancient ancestors more. Thank you very much. Νομίζω συζήτηση δεν χρειάζεται να γίνει τώρα. Θα δούμε ανάλογα με τον χρόνο, γιατί τον έχουμε ξεπεράσει λίγο, μήπως γίνει στο τέλος η συζήτηση. Άρα θα δώσω τώρα το λόγο στον δεύτερο ομιλητή, που είναι ο καθηγητής
Professor Angelos Kotios, Rector Dean, excuse me, I think Rector. Dean was the wrong word, excuse me. Mr. Kotios, you're remotely participating in our conference. And we want to talk about money, financial system in ancient Sparta. I hope you can hear me. Mr. President, I can hear you very well. I welcome you and I salute you and thank you very much for the introduction. Before I start, I want to say that it's really difficult for me to speak after such a significant science. Personally, I'm not an archaeologist, or neither have studied history in order to approach such topic, but it happened to be attached to my interests and my topic of interest and research regarding the development of money since today. So that's why I can present my topic. Before I start, I really want to thank the organizing committee, the Institute of Sparta, and personally Ms. Kanalopoulou, you that you're the president of the conference and of the organizing and scientific committee. And I would like to say that it's my great pleasure for participating in a conference that significant personalities are participating as well from the academic world, and not only from the academic world. It is remarkable what the Institute of Sparta provides to us, and as I have noticed, I should congratulate all the bodies, either with the Foreign University of Rome, USA, or other foreign universities. We need to thank the region, the University of Peloponnese, the University of Peloponnese, and of course the municipality of Sparta. Moreover, I need to make to correct some small parts. I'm not serving right now as a rector of the University of Piraeus, but I'm also interested in and I work in the field of tourism as well, so I understand, and of course I can talk with the rector and communicate what you said before, and I need to introduce my topic, which has to do with the economic model, currency, and inheritance law and public finances in ancient Sparta. I should say that a really unexpected disease did not let me to participate and see you all in that venue, in this conference, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to participate online. Our topic focuses on the financial and public finances in ancient Sparta. Of course, the biggest part of the historical research has to do with the army, the military aspect of Sparta, the systems of governance, and of course, the financial systems and the economic sector are a bit neglected, I can say. There are many researchers had focused on the economic and financial system, economic and social way of life in Sparta. The questions that I would need to set before making my exact speech. And of course, I suppose that all this would be written in the proceedings of the conference. So, which was the role and position of money, and especially currency, in the framework of the ancient world, and especially Sparta? We had iron coins, and I'll be focused on the framework of the economic model of Sparta. And I would say that coinage was not something simple in the ancient years. The currency was a kind of symbol, and it was a symbol of the social and economic and financial conditions of the area. It had its own background, and it was not just a coinage work. We should connect and approach this topic from the economical and social part and sector of the history. Of course, which was the coinage condition in Sparta? It was the same in all historical periods. Of course, the answer is no. If Sparta if Sparta had issued an international currency, how was the trade easy to achieve and the trade operations easy to achieve with other cities or countries? Of course, what we could say is the economy and currency was something important for being powerful, both in the military or war operations to be done. And how was the army and war operations funded? So I wanted to say something for the economic model of Sparta, and I will begin with this. Because in order to approach the currency, we should describe the economic model of Sparta and what Sparta created. So, Sparta had a unique mixed economic system whereby public regulations and property coexisted with the private economy as well. Of course, financial and political regulations for the three classes, the Omi, Periki, and Ilots. There were different regulations for Omi, Periki, and of course Ilots, and those regulations should be, in these regulations there should be harmony between the three classes and the three subsystems. We should also say that the economic model of Sparta had also influenced the mindset and of the ancient and modern philosophers as well. For example, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Thomas Hobbes, Xenophon, Platon. And what was the fundamental elements and principles, the basic constitutional elements and principles of the economic model of Sparta? Of course, the state control and the common property and land distribution. There are many debates on this. Regarding the Ilots and whether they were citizens or they were property of the city. This is also the agricultural base because Sparta and many historic sources say that the agricultural base of Sparta was unique. Of course, thirdly, the collective living, the economical model which served the military orientation and the priority in the military preparedness and communal values. The financial freedoms for individuals. And we will describe the way and the loans of Sparta and of ancient Sparta trade in industry of that period. There were many private financial freedoms. Of course, we should talk about self-sufficiency and isolationism, and consequently the trade, despite the really significant and really important products of Sparta and unique products of Sparta, the trade was limited. There was an avoidance of luxury, simplicity, and almost unmoneyed society is something that we will focus on. And we can say that there was that the economical model was structured as a way of reassuring the fundamental principles of military preparedness, self-sufficiency, and simplicity. So the economic model was something like the way to make some things and not the big goal, the big aim. So we move on, and we have our first notice. Until 266 before Christ, Sparta did not issue gold, silver, or bronze coins as other cities had done. And we should say now that there was no way and space to cut such coins. it also influences the current bibliography, the opinion and the view of Plutarchus, who said that the legislator Lycurgus, this important personality, said that the love for money will destroy Sparta and nothing else. So Plutarchus said that the great legislator, that the great cancelled all gold and silver coins and ordered that only iron should be used, and to it he attached only a small price for great weight and bulk, so that a 10 value required much storage in the house and a pair of oxen to carry it. When this was validated, many kinds of crime disappeared from Lacedaemon, for who could steal something or take bribes in it, or steal it, or take it by force, when it was not possible to hide it, possess it jealously, or even make a profit by cutting it. For the red hot iron was quenched with vinegar, it is said, so that the hardening would take away its utility and value for any other purpose, rendering it weak and unsuitable. Iron mining could not be carried to the rest of Greece, nor was it of any value there, but rather it was considered ridiculous. That was what Plutarchus said about Lycurgus. And the discussion after this narrative and this long-held view of Lycurgus, it was strongly questioned. This opinion is nowadays useless because in the Lycurgus era and to the years that he focused on, there was no silver or gold coins. So given that Lycurgus lives in the 8th century before Christ, in this time period in Greece there was no coins regarding such that Lycurgus mentioned, so that Plutarchus mentioned, so there was no such coins neither in Greece nor in Asia or other areas, so Lycurgus could not ban any coins at the same time that there was no coins to ban. So there was a kind of skewers called oveli, and were used in a limited way as currency. So different metals were used in order to create those skewers, and Sparta had a significant production of iron, and of course other areas that had not iron or gold, and there were not such wealth that as Athens was in order to buy iron from other areas, they could not have such coins, and there were no elements and evidence that to approve this opinion. And sometimes it is said that there were no evidence that those oveli were used in a way of exchange or value storing. And in case those oveli were not used as currency, what was the way of trading and exchange? First of all, there was an exchange of goods in that time period and in those societies. And some people were not only merchants, or they had also jobs based in the agricultural sector. So there was a society based on exchange of goods, and we know that there was the parallel or exclusive use of other cities' coins. It has happened also with Mavrovunio and Kosovo. They use euro, and other countries have the dollar. And I want to close this section with this. Until 404 before Christ, there was no legislation banning the use of foreign coins. Please give me some minutes. After having many spoils and coins in ancient Athens, there was the individual use of coins were banned, which means that the money taken from Lykurgos funded just the state fund. Of course, after this, Gilipos Philippos went away. And the Hellenistic times, the King Ares was the first to create coins due to the Hermonian war. You can see the tetradagon of Ares. On the one side, there's the is Hercules' face, and in the other, you can see Zeus. And of course, there is King Ares written in the bottom of the coin. Cleomenes was a significant legislator as well, and he implemented the systematic coinage in Sparta. You can see the tetradagon of Cleomenes as well on the right side of the slide. It symbolizes the Hellenistic monarchy. Of course, Navis also issued some very rare tetradrachms, comparing the head of its face, and in the other side you can see a really tired form of Hercules. Those coins by Navis also linked to the expenditure on the construction of the walls of Sparta, which was 9.66 kilometers. And Sparta had to adopt the archaic coin. On one side you can see, excuse me, it was a coin that on the one side you could see the symbols of archaic the archaic lake, and of course in the 146 before Christ the Romanian democracy bound the Greek city-states. Under Roman rule, many cities were allowed to issue their own local bronze coinage. These coins are known today as Roman provincial or Greek imperial coins. As far as Sparta was concerned, in the civil wars that brought the end of the Roman Republic, a Spartan named Eurykles Lacedaemonius fought alongside Octavian in the decisive Battle of Actium and was rewarded with Roman citizenship under the name Gaius Julius Eurykles. One of the last coins of Sparta was one of the state Galinos. We can see the girl called Sparta, and on the other side we can see the Osculus with a lance mounted on horses for the first time. This history was sought after the violent invasion. Unfortunately, there's no time to get more in detail about this, or else the committee gives me some more minutes in order to explain. Thank you very much. If I made bad use of your time, it was a really huge topic, and it was not really easy to present it in only 20 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kotius, for this really interesting presentation. Unfortunately, the time has passed and we are not able to give you some more minutes in order to talk about your other few topics, but everything that you've said here and you've presented us, it was really interesting for the financial and the public finances of Sparta, and some principles that you've explained to us that show and highlight the finances of Sparta, such as self-efficiency, simplicity, discipline, and those were the principles of Lycurgus. And based on these values, I would like you to ask something before leaving the conference. If we transmit those words in today's terminology, could we be able to make the parallelism in a communist society? Could all this be able to get described in and implemented in a communist society? Of course, we could say that we have a connection of the system of the existing socialism and free market and free economy. Of course, some of these are more have the tendency to approach the social democratic mentality, and the goal was for people to have the same amount of wealth, the same rights, the same chances, and there is a tend to approach such mentality. And we have information about the land that the Spartan citizens may had, and it was quite the same, and it was the 4.5 hectares, and all people had the chance to have the same goods. Of course, the answer is yes to your question. The answer to your question is yes. We can say many more and many more details, but we do not have the time. So you want to say that this was a mixed system, and the same happens with the way of governance. Was it ruled and governed by a few, or was it democratic? Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your answers and information. It was my pleasure to participate in this. Thank you very much, Mr. Kotios. Now, it is time for the third and last speaker, Mr. Paul Rai, who is going to talk about It is really interesting, Mr. Rai, and we're excited to hear your presentation. The floor is yours.
Να ευχαριστήσω την κυρία Κανελοπούλου και την Οργανωτική Επιτροπή. Είναι η δεύτερη μου εμφάνιση σε αυτό το συνέδριο. Είναι η δεύτερη φορά που παρευρίσκομαι εδώ.
Are doing in focusing attention on Sparta. And I hope they continue to do this, and I would be delighted if a conference were held in Sparta, New Jersey. In the United States, we don't name any football teams after the Athenians. I have never heard of a football team, high school or college, named after Athenians. We call them Spartans. Now, the other side of that is no one names high school teams after the Achaeans. We call them Trojans, but so it is. My subject today is was there in antiquity a Spartan mirage? Prior to the French Revolution, there was hardly anyone who had a good word to say about Athens. Marchemont Needham, who wrote in the late 1640s and in the 1650s, is the only unabashed early modern admirer that I turned up when I explored the relationship between ancient and modern republicanism in Republics Ancient and Modern, and again in Against Throne and Altar. In those days, the one Greek polis thought worthy of close attention was Lacedaemon. Sparta's greatest admirer was Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who at one point set out to write a history of that polis. His admiration rings out loud and clear in a passage written for the book's introduction. Here's what Rousseau says. The greatest inconvenience associated with my endeavor is that here one sees men who resemble us almost in nothing, who seem to us to be outside of nature, perhaps as much because we are in that state ourselves as because they are in fact there. Their crimes inspire in us horror. Sometimes their virtues themselves make us shiver. Because we are weak and pusillanimous in good times and in bad, everything that bears a certain character of force and vigor seems to us impossible. The incredulity that we parade is the work of our cowardice rather than that of our reason. Now, David Hume of Scotland, who was no admirer of Sparta, nonetheless thought Lacedaemon a great wonder. Ancient policy, he wrote, was violent and contrary to the more natural and usual course of things. It is well known with what peculiar laws Sparta was governed, and what a prodigy that republic is justly esteemed by everyone who has considered human nature as it has displayed itself in other nations and other ages. Were the testimonies of history less positive and circumstantial, such a government would appear a mere philosophical whim or fiction, and impossible ever to be reduced to practice. It was not until the 19th century that public intellectuals such as George Grote and scholarly students of antiquity began to celebrate the virtues of Athenian democracy and to exhibit with regard to the testimony concerning Sparta the incredulity denounced by Rousseau. Politics is sometimes said to be downstream from culture, but in the scholarly world, the opposite is quite often true. A mighty blow was struck against the reputation of Lacedaemon in a 2-volume study published in 1933 and 1943 by a French scholar named François Ollier, which he entitled Le Mirage Spartiate. It was his claim that what figures like Hume and Rousseau thought they knew about ancient Lacedaemon is a distant echo of a profound distortion propagated by a series of anti-democratic upper-class intellectuals in the wake of what came to be called the Peloponnesian War. In support of this contention, he made a valiant attempt to collect and analyze all of the ancient commentary on Sparta, and he devoted chapters to the figures who proved in the long run to be especially influential. To Plato, for example, and to Aristotle, Isocrates, Xenophon, and Plutarch. There can be no doubt that in and after the 5th century, if not also before, Lacedaemon was an object of curiosity, and that it inspired in many, if not all quarters, a measure of admiration, if not awe. Thucydides captures this when he describes the impact on the Greeks of the surrender in 425 of a small cohort of Spartans isolated on the little island of Sphacteria, who found themselves confronted by an overwhelming force displayed by the Athenians. Of all the events that took place in the course of the Peloponnesian War, Thucydides tells us, this was the one most contrary to the expectation of the Greeks. They thought it inconceivable that a shortage of food or any other necessity could induce Lacedaemonians to hand over their arms. They expected that such men would fight on for as long as they could and die with their weapons in their hands. They were incredulous and could not believe that those who had surrendered were the equal of those who died. These Hellenes, scattered along the shores of the Mediterranean and the Euxine, were not alone in their astonishment. The Spartans themselves had trouble getting their minds around this event. And when a long-term truce was negotiated and the prisoners returned home, they were for a time treated as inferiors and denied their rights as full citizens. Thanks to the conduct of Leonidas and his bodyguard of 300 at Thermopylae, and to the performance of the Lacedaemonians under the command of Pausanias the regent at Plataea, expectations were high both at home and abroad, and there was without a doubt a Spartan mystique. This does not, however, prove Ollier's case. Bravery is, after all, something worthy of admiration, and if there is a political community that has developed a regimen capable of instilling courage on a scale that staggers the imagination, that community will be held in awe, especially in a world less devoted to commerce than to war. We must never forget what Rousseau and Hume imply, that the ancient Greek polis was martial. It was not bourgeois. If Thucydides can be trusted, the prestige that the Spartans lost that day at Sphacteria, they regained 7 years later at the Battle of Mantinea. And we can be confident that the admiration accorded Lacedaemon was heightened further by the victory over the Athenians at Aegospotami in 405. There is nothing odd about the fascination with Sparta that gripped Herodotus, Thucydides, Plato, Xenophon, Isocrates, and Aristotle. Nor is it strange that they evidenced misgivings regarding democracy. As is clear in the so-called Persian debate, Herodotus was not a man blinded by regime partisanship. He looked on with an impartial eye, and although he may well have had a regime preference, he was capable of discerning defects in every form of government. If Thucydides, Plato, Xenophon, Isocrates, and Aristotle were critics of democracy, if they evidenced an admiration for Sparta, it surely had to do with Lacedaemon's victory in the Peloponnesian War. In the 10 years that separated the dispatch of the Sicilian expedition from the catastrophe at Aegospotami, Athens came apart at the seams, while Sparta maintained solidarity. How could an intelligent man who had lived through these years or grown up in their wake not have entertained misgivings concerning Athens' democracy and not have entertained a measure of admiration for Lacedaemon? It is nonetheless telling that Lacedaemon was far more often praised than imitated. This is a sign that misgivings lurked in the background, and that while there was a mystique, next to no one nourished illusions, and there was no mirage. Isocrates, who was a rhetorician and wrote model orations, I will leave to one side, for he purported to be a master of the art of persuasion. His aim was instruction in that art, and it is not easy to distinguish when he actually what he actually believed from what he put in those orations. He was showing you what he could do. Thucydides, Plato, Xenophon, and Aristotle are another matter. They were, like Isocrates, pedagogues of a sort, but their aim was not to teach an art of manipulation. It was to convey wisdom. And so their treatment of political regimes evidences the judicious weighing of virtues and defects that one finds in Herodotus's Persian debate. Thucydides was an Athenian. His subject, his real subject, was Athens. When Pericles, at the outset of what Thucydides calls the war between the Peloponnesians and the Athenians, told his compatriots that they would win through, the historian believed him. The story that the latter tells in his history is an attempt to explain to himself and to others why Pericles' predictions proved wrong. By way of his narrative, he makes it clear that Athens defeated itself. As for Sparta, all that it had to do to win was to remain impassive, escape bitter domestic conflict, maintain focus and discipline, and sidestep unnecessary risks. Had the Athenians been capable of following Pericles' advice, he implies, they almost certainly would have won, but they weren't capable of doing that. It should then be no surprise that Thucydides should have little to say about Lacedaemon itself. Of course, he does allow us to see that it could produce impressive men. Apart perhaps for Alcibiades, is there anyone among the successors of Pericles who bears comparison with the Eurypontid king Archidamus, with Brasidas, or even Gylippus? Also, in his description of the Battle of Mantinea, Thucydides gives us a picture of Spartan discipline and an indication of the profound difference that that discipline could make. In a similar fashion, Thucydides provides us with information suggesting Lacedaemon's defects. The Spartans prided themselves on their sophrosune, that is, on their modesty, moderation, and good sense. In one passage, Thucydides attributes this quality to the Lacedaemonians, noting that of the Hellenes, only the Chians rivaled the Spartans in their possession of sophrosune. In another, a few paragraphs later, he indicates that each of these two communities possessed an exceptionally large servile population. What he intimates via this juxtaposition is that the modesty, moderation, and good sense evidenced by the Lacedaemonians is less a quality of character instilled in them by their upbringing and moral formation than a fragile byproduct of the fear generated at Sparta by the prospect of a servile rebellion. There are two other passages that point to his awareness that the Spartan regime is defective. At an assembly held at Lacedaemon shortly before the outbreak of the war described by Thucydides, the Athenians, in an apparent attempt to head off the struggle, issued, he reports, a warning to the Spartans. If, having eliminated us, you were to establish an empire, you would quickly squander the goodwill you secured because of the fear others entertain regarding us, particularly if you were to conduct yourself in the manner in which you conducted yourself during the short time in which you held the hegemony against the Persians. Your customs do not mix well with those of others. And when one of you goes abroad, when one of you goes abroad, he employs neither the mores of his own city nor those used by the rest of the Greeks. It would be easy to dismiss this as a partisan claim on the part of the Athenians, were it not for the fact that the subsequent history retailed by Thucydides bears it out. It does not matter whether Thucydides invented this passage, as many scholars no doubt suppose, or simply selected it from among the things that his compatriots had reportedly said and highlighted it here, as I believe. Either way, given the fact that he lived long enough to witness the aftermath of the war, its inclusion in his narrative is indicative of his thinking. Much the same can be said regarding the second of the two pertinent passages. In the exchange they had with the leaders of the Melians in 416, the Athenians are said to have conceded that when it came to their own interests and the nomoi prescribed within their polity, the Lacedaemonians practiced arete in a thoroughgoing manner. But they then reportedly added that when dealing with outsiders, the Lacedaemonians are of those whom we know the most conspicuous for thinking that the pleasant is beautiful or noble, and that the advantageous is just. This too was borne out by the events that took place in the aftermath of the Spartan victory over Athens. The implication of these two passages is that Lacedaemonian virtue was a hothouse flower, and the Spartans were unfit for imperial rule. I belabor the thinking of a figure who does not loom large in Ollier's argument for a reason. Plato and Aristotle are, like Thucydides, nuanced in their treatment of Lacedaemon. None of these figures treats Sparta simply as an oligarchy. That claim is a figment of the late modern imagination. These two Greek writers are aware, of course, that every Greek polis was what Tocqueville would later speak of as an aristocracy of masters. If they do not dwell on the fact, it is because servitude was a universal institution. Their aim is to highlight what it is that causes one Hellenic aristocracy of masters to differ from another. And this leads them to distinguish what came to be called mixed regimes from democracies on the one hand and oligarchies on the other. Plato, in his Laws, makes much of this, in part because he believed that the mix weighed against the defect that these pure regimes displayed, and in part because it was obvious that it contributed to the civic peace and stability responsible for Lacedaemon's victory in the struggle with Athens. Aristotle is by no means averse to thinking along the same lines. These two figures recognize that there is something admirable about Lacedaemon, And they praised the Spartans first for instituting a species of paideia aimed at shaping character and instilling virtue. Neither, however, believes that the particular paideia accorded young Spartans is worthy of admiration and emulation. It is especially telling that neither Plato nor Aristotle attributes to the Lacedaemonians the sophrosune, the moderation, modesty, and good sense that they claim for themselves. Aristotle, in fact, contends that there was something beast-like about the upbringing of young Spartans. And Plato makes a comparable point when he draws attentions to the shortcomings of a polity founded on an eros for honor, both in his Republic and in his laws. Both his Republic and his laws ought to be read as a correction of Lacedaemonian defects. Among other things, Plato believed that the virtue of the Lacedaemonians was, in the literal sense of the word, superficial, that Spartan paideia and the honorific culture which it inspired produced men obsessed with how they appeared to their fellow Lacedaemonians, who were in fact torn between their public duties and their private wants. Such men, he observed, will long for money just as those in oligarchies do, and under the cover of darkness like savages, they will pay honor to silver and gold. The consequence was a Spartan disobedience of the law against the possession of gold and silver, so widespread and so pervasive that there was, he says, not in all of Hellas as much gold and silver as is held privately in Lacedaemon. Through many generations, it has been entering the place from every part of Greece and often from the barbarians as well, but to no other place does it ever depart. As in the fable of Aesop, what the fox said to the lion is true. The tracks left by the money going into Lacedaemon are clear, but nowhere can one see any traces of it going back out. To this result, the custom of treating a man's home as a realm truly private made a profound contribution. The Athenian philosopher speaks of the magazines for storage and domestic treasure of the Spartiates, and he mentions the walls surrounding their houses, which are exactly like private nests where they can make great expenditure on women and on whomever else they might wish. And the evidence bears out his claim that these houses were stocked with valuables. Aristotle shared Plato's judgment of what the latter, with an eye to its single-minded focus on glory and honor, termed the democratic regime. He took note of the sumptuary laws limiting the expense and specifying the character of funerals, and he was aware of the regulations governing the comportment of women and denying them the right to let their hair grow long, to wear jewelry in public, and to otherwise adorn themselves. But he thought these and other similar nomoi grossly inadequate, and he contended that the Spartan legislator had in fact mixed the love of honor with the love of money, and had therefore formed private individuals covetous of wealth. The peripatetic philosopher attributed this in part to the absence of laws regarding the household. In particular, like Plato, he faulted Spartan institutions for their failure to bring under control the women, who live intemperately in every kind of license and luxury, observing that the necessary consequence is that riches are held in honor, especially when the citizens fall under the rule of their women, as tends to happen among peoples devoted to soldiering and war. The arrangements regarding the women not only introduce an air of unseemliness into the regime, they tend to foster avarice as well. It should not then be surprising that when in the period stretching from 1965 to 1974, Eugène Napoleon Tigerstedt published a 2-volume study of the legend of Sparta in antiquity, he did not reiterate Ollier's critique of Plato and Aristotle. It was his view that the chief purveyor of what he, like Ollier, took to be legend was Xenophon. That Xenophon was an ardent admirer of Lacedaemon is a view long held, and there's this to be said for it. Xenophon spent most of his life in exile from Athens as a client of the Spartans, and the encomium of his patron Agesilaus that he penned in the wake of that Eurypontid king's death is anything but critical of the man. His Hellenica, however, is something else again. It belongs to a different genre in which praise must be earned if it is to be bestowed. Just as Thucydides' history has Athens' demise as an imperial power as its subject, Xenophon's book is focused on the failure of the Spartan hegemony. And as Christopher Tuplin has recently demonstrated in detail, it is a critique of Lacedaemon, toned down, of course, but unmistakable in its character once one rereads the text with this possibility in mind. If it does not dwell on Epaminondas, the liberation of Messenia, and the like, it is not because Xenophon is concealing Sparta's defeat or cannot bring himself to face it. It is rather because Xenophon is not writing a chronicle on the Thucydidean model. It is because his Hellenica more nearly resembles a commentary on the events of his time, and because he, like Thucydides, is like Thucydides in thinking that the polity on which he has focused his attention defeated itself. In other words, he doesn't talk about Epaminondas because he thinks Sparta defeated itself. Epaminondas was secondary to that. Thucydides doesn't talk much about Sparta because he thinks Athens defeated itself. What Christopher Tuplin has done for Xenophon's Hellenica, Noreen Humble has done for his Constitution of the Lacedaemonians. That work, too, was long read as a pro-Spartan tract. In fact, however, it is a balanced account of what the regime achieved and what it failed to achieve. Tellingly, Xenophon never, ever attributes sophrosune, moderation, modesty, and good sense, to the Lacedaemonians. And it is their lack of this quality, it is the absence in the character of those produced by the laws of Lycurgus of a modesty, moderation, and good sense impervious to temptation and capable of sustaining itself in the absence of surveillance that explains the failure of the Spartan hegemony. As Humble demonstrates, what Xenophon has to say in the devastating penultimate chapter of the work follows naturally from what he ostentatiously refrains from saying in the preceding paragraphs. I'm aware that in earlier times, the Lacedaemonians chose to live with one another at home, having modest possessions, rather than to serve as harmos in the cities and to court corruption by subjecting themselves to flattery. I am also aware that back then they feared it being discovered that they were in possession of gold, while now there are those who actually make a display of its possession. To prevent this, I know there were back then acts dictating the expulsion of foreigners, and to travel abroad was prohibited lest the citizens ingest a species of slackness and sloth apt to eventuate in recklessness and crime. Now I know that those deemed first among them are zealous that they never cease serving as harmos in foreign parts. There was a time when they took care to be worthy of leadership. Now they exert themselves much more to exercise rule than to be worthy of doing so. Accordingly, while in former times the Hellenes would journey to Lacedaemon and ask her to lead them against those regarded as malefactors, many are now rallying with one another to prevent the Spartans from regaining dominion. There is no need to wonder why these censures are directed at them, since it is clear that they obey neither God nor the laws of Lycurgus. Xenophon describes here in retrospect what Thucydides' Athenians described in prospect. He too regarded Spartan virtue as a hothouse flower, produced in reaction to the Helot threat and enforced by surveillance. The chief Spartan magistrates are called ephors, overseers. When exported, it withered. In short, Xenophon's conclusion was that the laws of Lycurgus, when judged by their putative aim, were a dismal failure. As should be clear by now, the so-called Spartan mirage is itself a mirage, a distortion produced by the modern scholarly imagination. The only element in Ollier's argument that is still widely accepted is his claim that Plutarch was a myth-maker and that under the influence of the peripatetic Stoic authors of treatises on the Lacedaemonian regime, he misrepresented early Sparta. This argument is also unsound. First, we know next to nothing concerning these studies. Second, these works were written in the wake of Aristotle's Constitution of the Lacedaemonians by his students Theophrastus of Eresus and Dicaearchus of Messana, by his epitomator Heraclides of Lembus, and by his Stoic imitators Spirus of Borysthenes. Third, It is likely that Aristotle's treatise resembled his constitution of the Athenians and addressed the origins of the Spartan constitution, the emergence of its constituent institutions, and the history of property relations at Sparta, a subject that is being discussed at this conference. Fourth, it is to say the least most improbable that Theophrastus and Dicæarchus departed widely from the account articulated by their master. It is inconceivable that the epitomator Heracles did so, and there's no evidence that Spirus did. It would, moreover, have been exceedingly awkward for Spirus to have done so, given the fact that the Lacedaemonians had decreed that Dicæarchus' account be read out loud to all the citizens once a year. In short, the treatises on which Plutarch based his life of Lycurgus were either written by Aristotle or were in all likelihood faithful variations on the Aristotelian account, which is itself likely to have been tolerably accurate. To this we can add that Plutarch was a discerning reader who greatly admired Aristotle. How likely is it that he embraced an account subsequent to that of the Peripatetic, which was at odds with what that great man had reported? I would suggest then that it is time to retire the phrase, the Spartan mirage, and to try once again to make sense of the evolution of Lacedaemonian institutions, including the economic and property arrangements that will be discussed in this conference, on the basis of what can be gleaned from the ancient reports and from the archaeological record. One does not have to embrace Rousseau's disdain for bourgeois society and echo his enthusiasm for the Spartans to acknowledge just how impressive they were. As David Hume's example should remind us, one can easily reject Lacedaemon as a model for human flourishing without spurning what the ancient writers had to say. If there is a Spartan mirage, it has been a byproduct of the incredulity that Rousseau so vigorously condemned. Thank you.
Όπως καταλάβατε, δεν διέκοψα τον καθηγητή Ράχε, μόνο ότι ξεπεράσαμε το χρόνο, διότι ήταν εξαιρετική η εισήγησή του. Δεν ήταν απλώς μια ομιλία.
It was not only at Spezia, it was also a study, very elaborated and very conceivable in a large size, and it creates so many for questions that you would also all have. The time is full, and this study should have been published for the Greek public and to be read as it merits. I am only worried whether the fault of Lycurgus was to insisted on verbality. He didn't want to write, he didn't want to have anything written, any constitution written, but the Athenians used to write. They have left a series of things for all, covering a lot of sphere, and all the things that the Spartans have written, and especially Lycurgus, was only verbal. All the virtues, all the values of Sparta, they had a different comparison, and it was very important. The specialization in the modern era, and how to say, the illumination, the enlightenment that was in favor of Sparta, the whole cycle, the whole was specialized, and the whole Balkan, we did not have this tension to respect the virtues and the values of Sparta. Would you like?
About the importance of Athens and its contribution, and in fact, virtually everything we know about Sparta in literature comes from Athenians or people who spent time in Athens, like Herodotus and Aristotle. I would only suggest that the fact that the Spartans outlasted the Athenians in the Peloponnesian War is a sign of something important and worthy of admiration.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Μήπως υπάρχει κάποια ανάγκη για μια ερώτηση, 2 το πολύ, όχι παραπάνω.
No more. You? Only you? Only one question, only you. First of all, I would like to congratulate your presence for the conference, for things that have to do with the constitutions of ancient Sparta, something that has to be minimized for all the states and the cities. Now, my question is, first of all, only one question, don't do a lot of questions. Has Paul Caltritz said something about helots, and what is their usage today? Helots, slaves with a very wide sense, was also in more states. They have been taken from Africa to other states, from the whole Islam world. We have the slain bazaars, helots of Sparta, were in better faith far from all the other slaves. The first question is that we said that you could only have one question, and the second is I only want to highlight the modern era. Do all Greeks with the mnemons, the memorizations, haven't we been modern helots? No, don't only the first question that will be answered from Cartlett's professor.
I'm not fully sure that I understood the question, but what I would say is that slavery throughout Greece was a pretty ugly thing, especially agricultural slavery and mining slavery. And the subjection of the helots here in Laconia and of the people of Messenia was a similarly ugly thing. There is this difference between the Spartan practice, and I'm not saying this as a manner of praising them, but there is the one difference that the helots in Laconia and the helots in Messenia had families. And the effect of that was to make them much more dangerous as a people. The slave populations, when they are disconnected from one another, when they are drawn from different places, as the Athenian slaves were, and cannot speak, they don't have any common language except the language of their masters. When they don't have families, when they don't have a history with the place, and when they don't have cults that bind them together as a single people, are not nearly as dangerous as the people of Messenia were. Slave revolts are rare in ancient Greece. It's interesting that the two main places that immediately come to mind are the Helot revolt in Sparta and the revolt on Chios, where you get another heavy concentration of slaves, and they outnumber the master class by a very considerable amount. The Spartan slaves, I think, were even more dangerous because they were a nation in bondage. They were like the Greeks during the Turkish period. And the Greeks were a lot of trouble during the Turkish period. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. Κυρίες και κύριοι, φτάσαμε στο τέλος της σημερινής συνεδρίας. Ευχαριστώ και τους ομιλητές.
We conclude for the first session, and we would like to thank you for your patience until the last speech and the whole exception of the time. And I would like also to thank Mrs. Kaunlalopoulou, and the session is done. We only need to do that the publications will be published in the Historical Review of Sparta. Σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. as well as on YouTube. And we'd also like to recognize the presence of the Deputy and ex-Deputy Manager of Agriculture, Stavros Arachoiovitis, for his presence in this conference. And we'd like to conclude saying that tomorrow will be tomorrow here at 10 a.m. in the morning for the second session. Bye-bye.